Hello, everyone. I'm Ted Mitchell, the president of the American Council on Education. For over 100 years now, the American Council on Education has represented presidents and chancellors from America's two-year, four-year public and private institutions. It's been an honor throughout that time for ACE to work with some of the nation's preeminent leaders in higher education. And leadership has really been an essential part of the American higher education story over those 100 years and 200 years before that, too. It's with that in mind that ACE created the Lifetime Achievement Award, an award that annually gives us the opportunity to recognize a woman or a man who has provided extraordinary leadership in higher education. And by that, we mean not just extraordinary leadership in an institution or an institution or two of higher education, but we mean an individual who has provided leadership through higher education to the broader society, living up to the highest aspirations we have as educators, to provide an excellent education to our students, to provide a stimulating campus environment for our faculty and staff, and to be a resource to our broader community as we seek to develop a more inclusive, more just society. So today, it's my honor to present the ACE Lifetime Achievement Award to a leader who certainly meets all of those characteristics. This year's winner is my friend and longtime colleague, Janet Napolitano, the immediate past president of the University of California, and currently the professor of public policy at the Goldman School of Public Policy at UC Berkeley. She served as the University of California's 20th president, and she was the first female president of UC. In that role, she led a university system of 10 campuses, 5 medical centers, 3 affiliated national labs, and a statewide agriculture and natural resources program. It is undeniable that the University of California is the strongest public research university on the planet. And it is in no small measure thanks to Janet Napolitano that the University of California has not only remained in that position, but has become stronger and stronger every year, despite significant challenge within the California budget, within the national environment for funding of research, and within a roiling social context in which issues of diversity, inclusion, and equity have become front and center. And so it really is a great honor to be able to give ACE's Lifetime Achievement Award to Janet Napolitano. But her achievement, as I suggested in the very beginning, goes beyond her work within the University of California. Janet Napolitano is a model of what it means to serve the public. She was the US Secretary of Homeland Security from 2009 to 2013, the governor of the state of Arizona from 2003 to 2009, Attorney General of Arizona from 1998 to 2003, and US Attorney for the District of Arizona from 1993 to 1997. That is what public service means. In 2017, under her leadership, the University of California was the first university in the country to file a lawsuit to stop the federal government's rescission of the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, more popularly known as the DACA program. Thanks to Janet and her team, injunctions granted in that case have allowed more than 500,000 DACA recipients, including many members of the UC community, to renew their authorizations and to live and work and study in the United States. Janet has worked to put UC on a path to 100% reliance on clean electricity across all of its campuses and medical centers by 2025. The same year, the university aims to achieve system-wide carbon neutrality. And I think for the work that we have shared and the work ahead, most notable have been Janet's achievements in making the University of California more accessible to more students in California and across the world. Thanks to her leadership and thanks to the leadership of the chancellors on the UC campuses, the University of California regularly rates as the campuses rate as many of the most important vehicles for social mobility in American society today. Excellence and equity go together, and nowhere do they go together more fundamentally than in the University of California. And for no one are those two aims more closely intertwined than our winner, Janet Napolitano. So Janet, congratulations on behalf of the American Council on Education. With our great thanks and the thanks of a grateful nation, we want you to have this award for your lifetime achievement as a truly extraordinary leader.
Well, thank you, Ted, for those overly generous remarks. And I appreciate receiving the award. It arrived by shipping just a couple of days ago, and I will proudly put it on my bookshelf in remembrance of this occasion. So I'm deeply appreciative.
Well, thanks. Thank you. And thanks to those overnight deliveries, we're now enjoying everything from awards to coffee hours, which are some of the things that we've learned during this pandemic.
We have learned many new skills during the pandemic, that's for sure.
We have, and maybe we should start there, because your term as president was really just kind of coming through the final lap as the pandemic was beginning. Can you take us behind the curtain a little bit and talk about what that was like as you worked with the chancellors and the directors of the national labs to figure out how to move forward?
The pandemic and the associated shutdowns were so sudden in a way. We were intent, however, on continuing the term, and that meant that our faculty, under the leadership of our provosts and our chancellors, had to turn on a dime and begin teaching remotely via Zoom. That was the primary platform that was used. And that's a transition that is easier said than done, particularly for faculty members who haven't taught remotely before, but they did a marvelous job, and students were able to continue making progress towards their degrees. We had to immediately depopulate the dorms, and so we incurred a substantial amount in refunds for housing and dining services, because you can't charge students for a service that you can't provide.
Right.
The state went into sort of a big budget crisis mode, not really being able to estimate with any accuracy what was going to happen with the California economy. So they gave the University of California and Cal State systems both significant reductions. So, and in the midst of that, we were providing healthcare at all of our hospitals. We basically converted them to be COVID hospitals. And that was a service we were more than willing to perform, but the trade-off was that we had to either cancel or significantly postpone other surgeries and procedures. And that meant a significant revenue loss on the healthcare side of the ledger. So all told, between the middle of March, when the shutdown orders came into play, until the end of June, the University of California suffered about a $1.5 billion budget deficit. So a lot of my last months as president were spent working our way through that and working with the campuses as they put into place plans for costs that they could postpone or curtail. Now we've been fortunate. The economy has come back. the revenue impact on California was nowhere near what was earlier anticipated. And so much, but not all of those budget cuts have been restored.
It was fortunate that we ended up there, and you talked about the services to students and to the community through the hospitals, and at the very same time, the UC research labs, one of the great strengths of the UC system, whether it's San Diego or UCSF, was turning its attention to the production of what we now know as, or the development of what we are now enjoying as the vaccines that will hopefully help us get through to the other end of this. So, one of the things from the bleacher seats where many of us were cheering you on, one of the things that was clear throughout, Janet, was that no matter what the choice was, your answer to your team was, we need to do the right thing. And we'll do the right thing, and we'll we'll pick up the pieces later. And I think that's really been a hallmark of your public services. What's our North Star, and let's do the right thing. You've got a tremendous record of doing the right thing, and it's always hard to pick one or two things that you're proudest of. But if you look back at your UC time, what are a couple of the things that really you're gonna remember as, yeah, I did a good job?
Yeah.
And if you have trouble, I have a list for you.
One is what you mentioned in your intro was our lawsuit to save the DACA program from rescission, because that directly impacted thousands of students, not just at the University of California, but across the country. And, I had helped create the DACA program when I was Secretary of Homeland Security. In fact, I think I'm the only cabinet secretary to have actually sued her successor. But that was, a great case.
Yeah, they had no idea who they were dealing with when they tried to take that away. You were just right there.
Yeah, and don't mess around with DACA. Now we can only hope that Congress puts it into statute so that any future desire to get rid of the program will not, it just won't succeed, because it will be memorialized in actual law, not by executive action. But that was one discrete thing where I thought the university could and should take an immediate leadership position. Another thing, when I think back on my 7 years as president, was that we were able to maintain and to some degree increase our reputation for excellence, while at the same time adding diversity to our student bodies. And there was real intentionality behind that. We knew that there was more that we could do to reach out to California's Latinx and Black populations, and make sure not only that they knew that the University of California was available to them and what they could get out of the University of California, but once they arrived, through a variety of different programs at our different campuses, to make sure they had the kind of support needed so that they would be sure to graduate. And that also ties into our efforts with first generation students. Right. So we had a whole first generation initiative. In the last few years, about 44% of our entering classes have been first in their families to go to college. That's an engine of mobility, and that's what a great public university can do. I'll leave it there, but I feel in a way a little abashed at accepting this award because I'm really accepting it on behalf of the wonderful leadership we have by our chancellors, by our faculty, by our staffs and all the workers at the campuses. It's not just one person, it's thousands of people, all motivated by the desire to provide a first-class education and to provide, cutting edge research in multiple disciplines.
Yeah, and so it's part of your greatness as a leader to complement your team. It's right to do that, but that's also what leadership is about mobilizing people around a vision, around an ideal. And I think that many who are watching might not have as complicated a view of California as the reality would bear out. Yes, California is liberal in its politics in many ways, but let's remember that California in this last election cycle denied the university the ability to use traditional affirmative action tools in balancing its class. Let's remember that California was one of the first states to abolish the use of race in admission. And so your ability to galvanize the leadership of the university around these twin goals of equity and excellence didn't happen in a vacuum. In fact, it happened against some significant headwinds. Just a number. I think that I'm right. You'll tell me if I'm not. That the number of Pell recipients, low-income students, many of whom are first generation and many of whom are minorities, number of Pell eligible students on the Berkeley campus exceeds the total number of Pell students in the Ivy League.
Oh, yes. And you could say that for
Almost
every
Irvine,
single
San Diego.
UC campus. Yeah. So because we average around 38% to 40% Pell eligible students in our student body. And one of the ways we do that is that we do not charge California resident students from families that make less than 80,000, which is far above the Pell threshold, but families who make less than 80,000 pay no tuition at the University of California. And we have other generous financial aid we make available to our students. And that means that over half of our undergraduates graduate with no debt. And those that graduate with debt, the average amount is just a little north of $20,000, which when you think about it is kind of the price of a car. As I like to say, unlike a car, which goes down in value the minute you drive it off the lot, your higher education is an asset that only increases in value over the course of a lifetime. So through the way we manage our financial aid, we've really been able to keep that debt load down if a student has debt at all.
And that's about 30% lower than the national average among students that take out debt. It's a remarkable story, and it's not just about the headlines. It's about the plumbing. Yeah. It's about these kinds of changes that you and your team have built in. One of the other ways in which you have made a UC education both more affordable and more accessible is by your leadership in the area of transfer admissions. And I know it's something that you pushed me and us at ACE on, and largely because of our conversations, we just completed the work of a national task force on transfer, and UC stands out as one of the systems that works in terrific collaboration to bring more transfer students in and to help them be successful. How did that come about?
Well, we had a goal that we set that for every two true freshmen, we would take one transfer student. California has a lot of community colleges. It's well known for them. They were part of the so-called master plan for education that was developed under former Governor Pat Brown and Clark Kerr, who was the former president of the University of California. Um, and so many students start at a community college that, making sure that, again, they knew what they needed to do to transfer, that we began working out all of those curricular decisions about, how credits move and all the like, so that it became less a Rubik's Cube than a linear progression. That was all work that we undertook. We called it our transfer initiative, but in point of fact, in our entering classes now, 2 freshmen to 1 transfer student is the general rule, and they're doing it. And the transfer students do very well. When they transfer in, they're already eligible and are taking upper division courses, and their graduation rates after 4 years either matches, or in some respects, in some campuses, actually is a little better than those who started as true freshmen. So it's not only getting them in, it's getting them out that you have to keep in mind.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's a wonderful model for the country, and I know that the collaborations with the community colleges, making sure that the credits that students take in community college transfer over, making sure that departments understand the syllabi of their courses. It really is it's extraordinary. Another place where you have helped diversify the UC campuses has been in the area of international students, and the University of California is truly an international resource. I remember when I was working at UCLA and would go to Asia for alumni visits. Wearing a UCLA T-shirt was, made me quite popular. It was, sort of one of the known brands, one of the name brands. Everybody wanted their kids to go to UCLA. International students are important to the university, from freshmen through graduate students and visiting scholars. Love to know your experience, and love to edge a little bit into some current policy things, because it looks like we're going to take a real hit this year in terms of the number of international students coming to US campuses. And from your various vantage points, your work in Arizona, your work certainly in Homeland Security, and at the University of California has given you a unique perspective on how we can compete.
Well, I'll start with my fundamental philosophy. The United States for decades has been a talent magnet for the world, and our system of higher education is the source of that magnetism, as it were. And you're right, Ted. The University of California has always had a good percentage of international students from around the globe. And that has continued. It's been a bit of a fight sometimes, I must say, because we have some in the legislature who believe that UC is only for Californians and would build a wall around California where international or out-of-state students are concerned. They're just wrong about that. It is a state university. It is paid for by the taxpayers of California to a large degree, but students gain value from being exposed to other students from around the country and from around the globe, and we can't lose sight of that. And then international student populations, I think we began to see level off at UC. Other institutions saw them go down during the Trump administration because of the rhetoric that was, very anti anybody from another land, and also the difficulties in getting visas. and that just, became a hassle. And other countries took advantage of that. International student populations in Canada and Australia have gone way up. And so we, in a way, we were cutting off our nose to spite our face. But between that phenomenon, and I think the Biden administration is going to be uh, um, changing that if they haven't changed it already, so that international students can get visas, can come to the United States. But the pandemic and all of a sudden, travel just stopped, and so uh, international students, those travel rules in many countries are still in effect. And I think how we manage international students moving forward as we come out of the pandemic is an open question. And then I would be remiss if I didn't comment on the fact of the increasing tensions with China,
Yeah.
which is the top country for international students for UC, and I think for the United
Is
States.
right.
And one would hope that these two superpowers could identify kind of some areas of strategic engagement. And one of those, of course, would be the ability of Chinese students to come to the United States to study.
Completely agree with you, and I think that those conversations are happening. Other conversations that are happening, I don't think quite as much progress, and love your insight into how much we should worry about research security and integrity. And certainly, that's when the China issue comes up. That's one of the things that policymakers, seemingly on both sides of the aisle, are quite concerned about.
Yes, and the Justice Department in the last 2 years or so of the Trump administration really had a dedicated initiative to identify researchers in the United States who were violating the law by not disclosing relationships with various entities in China. Or not abiding by their immigration restrictions, whatever. And so we had several cases brought involving the University of California, and postdocs were, I think, the top target there. But we've also seen some notable cases against faculty in states around the country. Look, I think in my view, things needed to tighten up a bit. I think people, certainly not by no means all, but a significant number have gotten rather lax about the requirements and restrictions on taking federal grant money, and some universities had also become somewhat lax in terms of verifying the immigration status of international either students or postdocs or even adjunct or other faculty. And so, look, there are rules. The rules exist for a reason. What I hope happens is that the message has been sent, the message has been received, and universities and their faculties have taken appropriate action so that that issue is resolved.
I think you've just shown one of the hallmarks of your leadership. Too often in education, people run into an issue and pretty quickly they divide and they run to their corners and start hurling invective and other things back and forth. And you have always been one to look not for the middle ground because it's the middle ground, but to try to appreciate the points of view and the points of evidence on both sides. And ACE and the University of California have worked together, I think, with a common understanding that yes, research security, intellectual property rights need to be protected. Yes, we probably got a little bit lax, but let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater, because globally engaged research is really the way that the world makes progress, and doing that in a safe and secure way is best for all of us. Okay,
And
I've got
when we saw a good example of that with the science coming out of the pandemic.
exactly.
You know, the Chinese sent the genetic code for the virus into the global ecosystem within days, it seemed, of being able to identify it, and then our scientists, based on research that had already been underway for years, went to work and began identifying how to develop not only a vaccine, but also uh, uh, relevant antibody and other treatments.
Therapeutics,
So
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
So um, the whole global the whole development of the vaccine illustrates the need to share research across national borders.
absolutely. We're running short on time, so I'm going to ask you a couple quick ones that are you are in a unique position for both of these. You mentioned the legislature earlier, and we talked about the California legislature a bit. Governors are playing an increasingly important role in publicly funded higher education across the states. We've heard in Idaho and in Florida, North Carolina, a couple of years ago, state legislatures and state governors have been involved in what used to be just higher education decisions. Um, do you have, if you were talking to the National Governors Association and sort of they were all rookies and you wanted to give them higher ed 101, what advice would you give governors about how to engage with their state systems?
So I think advice would be, as a governor, look, you can either help your public education system, like a higher education system, you can really hurt it, or you can just leave it alone and trust it to do what it does. I think the most beneficial course is to identify ways that you can help it. Now, the number one thing the public universities are going to say is give us more money.
Right.
And I would caution public universities before they ask for more money to be able to demonstrate more concretely what they will do with that money and what value it is to the governor and to the state. I also think that universities need to think in terms of coalitions of support. So that it's not just the university president going up to the state capitol. It's the university president plus a coalition of business leaders, plus a motivated and energized alumni group, plus students. And I found that in California, at least, Ted, that when we could work with the associated students of the University of California and join hands in terms of how we were approaching the legislature, that was very productive. So, as advice to a governor, I would say, look, you need to look at how you help your public higher education system, because that is one of the tried and true tactics you have in your bailiwick that can help with social mobility and income inequality and economic development and all these other things you want to address. And if I were counseling university presidents, I would say engage with the state capitol, but don't do it by yourself.
Excellent. Last question, and this is speculative. Now that you're not on the field on a day-to-day basis, much news about the post-pandemic or current pandemic application process. We've noticed that becoming test optional has brought more students into the college application mix than previously. I think UCLA had 140,000 applicants this year. It's a supply. There's a supply and demand imbalance that I want you to wonder about with me. Can a university become too popular?
Hmm. Well, it does make the admissions process somewhat of a lottery, because you take the top, 7 or 8% or whatever it is, and then you could go down another 7 or 8%, and those students would do just as well. You can go down another 7 or 8%, and those students would do just as well. And so I think it really puts a burden on admissions to be as rigorous as possible without the having test scores, and to make sure that issues of implicit bias don't enter into how you evaluate an application.
Great. Okay, last question. What are you excited about as you look at the prospects for higher education?
I think we're going to, I predict that we're going to enter a boom period. There'll be all kinds of pedagogical innovations that happen due to the pandemic. I think state budgets are going to be much more full because of federal money that has come in and because of the economic recovery that is already happening. I think that there'll be a renewed emphasis on excellence and equity as complementary features of public higher education and higher education in general. So I think this is going to be a great decade to come. And I'm a faculty member now. I'm a professor, and I'm excited to be part of it.
That's so great. That's so great. And what a wonderful spot to leave us. Janet Napolitano, thank you for your time today. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking and congratulating President Janet Napolitano on a wonderful, wonderful career of service to our nation and to higher education, and for your leadership of the University of California. Janet, thank you, and look forward to seeing you soon again.
Thank you, Ted.